everyone. Welcome to this Ptenopus conversation. This is part of our Opus 6, which is themed around the labor of art. So we have with us today Kanika Gupta. She's a freelance journalist and a documentary filmmaker. And she's here to talk about her first film, which is The Waiting Game. So thank you, Kanika, for agreeing to be a part of this, and such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I must admit, I'm a bit of a fan. I've been following your reports and all your travel stories on Instagram. And I was thinking, it'll be great to speak to you sometime. So when I heard about this film, I took a chance and approached you for this. And yeah, thank you for responding.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So before we begin, I'll just give a brief introduction to Kanika and this film that we are going to talk about. So she's an independent journalist and has extensively covered human rights, gender issues, and geopolitics across the global south. She's recently completed her MA in documentary filmmaking from the Met Film School, Berlin. And this film has been a result of that course, and I believe with a grant from the Pulitzer Center. Is that right? Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and to talk briefly about this film, here she highlights the precarious lives of the fishermen who are caught in the troubled waters in the maritime boundary between India and Pakistan. And she mainly focuses on the ordeal that the families have to go through, which also hence the title, The Waiting Game. Firstly, I think the first question that came to my mind when I was watching the film was the length of it. So I think it's under 18 minutes.
Yep.
And also for those of you who are interested, she's written an in-depth article for the Himal South Asian. And the film is, primarily based on that. So if you want to know more about it, it's a really thorough piece of work. So yeah, if you could talk about the constraints, because I'm pretty sure there was so much to pack in this short film.
Thank you, first of all, for this very interesting introduction to this upcoming project. And of course, reading about it, I think to have someone coming from a place of knowledge, it's a great pleasure to talk about the subject then. So speaking of constraints, I think one of the biggest constraints was that these people that I eventually chose to film were located, in different parts of Gujarat. So there was a lot of distance, and sometimes, and these people are not easily reachable because they are village people. So
Mm.
sometimes while I was in my production phase, in my pre-production phase, I lost touch with these people. I lost touch with my field producer who helped me while I was reporting in Gujarat. So I was really nervous. How am I going to reach, my protagonists, and how am I going to talk to them? How am I going to film them? So and I knew that I'm on a clock because I just received the grant from Pulitzer, and we are bound by a schedule, even though they were incredibly supportive and gave me a lot of flexibility. But you also have, a certain time foundations in that sense. So I knew that I have to start filming, and also I live in Germany. Just so I can also bring that up, that I live in Germany, so I knew that I'm only in India for a very short period of time, and then I have to leave for Germany. So I was getting very nervous about how do I reach these people, and then I had a discussion with my DOP, and I was like, you know what, I'm not able to reach my field producer, and at the time the elections were going on in India. So since Gujarat being a very important center for our government. So I just talked to my DOP. I was like, you know what, we are just going to have to take a chance. And I know these people by face, so we're going to have to go and look for them individually. So luckily for me, my DOP was on board, and even though it's a crazy exercise that we would have to actually go on the field and look for them, but thankfully my field producer reached out to me well within time, and we were able to plan everything. But the main problem was that I had not initially informed them that I would be arriving. So I just basically showed up and said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to put you on camera." So that was a bit that
Mm.
kind of took them aback. They were in the middle of their own things. Like Manju Bain, one of my protagonists, was in
Mhm.
a wedding when we
Okay.
arrived, when we showed up at the village. So she left the wedding and she came just to be, just for the film. And I wanted to kind of say that if we could, we could do it at another time, but we knew that we are bound by a production schedule. So but it was very kind of her, and she also understood that this is a story that she wants to tell as well, because she's
Mm.
waiting for her husband to come back for now 3 years. So these were some production constraints, and we were hopping between a lot of cities. We were in Mumbai once, and then we were in Diu once, and then we were across Gujarat. So I think logistically, I did struggle a bit because I was doing everything on my own. I didn't have a production house behind me who could handle these logistics for me.
Mm.
These were some constraints, and kind of took away some of my, directorial, took away from me the agency I would have practiced as a director if these things were handled by someone else, but I was handling everything on my own. So yeah, these are some of the constraints I experienced while filming.
Right, right. And also, since you said that you just showed up and, but they were so eager to talk to you, and so that also says a lot about the issue particularly. Like I was thinking, and which also takes me to the next question is, what was your introduction to the issue? Because even while reading up on it, there isn't much that we get to know about it. And I guess also it has a lot of layers to it as well, just in terms of so many aspects. I mean, each could be a separate film on its own if you were to explore it. And because they
Absolutely.
were also so eager to speak to somebody who could highlight this. So yeah, if you could just say that, how you came across this issue and why do you think it's so underreported, although there's so much to explore. Yeah.
I think as far as my protagonists were concerned, they knew me because I had
Mm,
already
okay.
reported.
Right.
I had already done ground reporting when
Mm,
I did three pieces on this issue. Like I did one for Nikkei Asia, I did one for South China Morning Post, and one
okay.
for Himal that you have
Mhm.
read. So this issue, it's not something I found and then I just landed,
Mhm.
at their doorstep with the camera. I have been working on it for
Right.
now year and a half. And
Mhm.
in that time period, I was connected to a lot of activists, a lot of people on the ground who spoke for me, like that we know this person and this journalist. So I was able to build that trust very early on in the
Mhm.
process. And then, of course, since they had already met me
Right.
because I had done the reporting there, so when I did show up, at least there was this, they recognized me that, and but it was just not something they were expecting. I mean, as is with every journalist, they come, they report, and it's done and
Mhm.
dusted. But I sort of kept on to it, and I also, at one point, these women gave me a list of uh, all the men prisoners who are currently in Pakistan, and really I think the one point that came to my mind that I want to do a documentary is actually while I was reporting, and these women, they came with like a list of at least 20, 30 men in their families, and they were begging and crying that please, if you can get us at least some information about what is happening with them. We don't know. They just go for fishing one day, and then their bodies come back. Like there was this one person who had passed while being in the prison, so they were like really
Right.
desperate to find some information. And then I was like, no, we need to talk about this. Like there are also families. We there are we have there has been a lot of discussion about the politics behind the issue.
Mhm.
Then there has been always, which has always been hijacked by the fact that India and Pakistan have, not very friendly relationships, diplomatic relationships. So it always get hijacked, and there's never said enough about what happens with the women, the children, the families, the mothers, the daughters, everything. It always just kind of, these stories just never receive any attention. So that's when I wanted to talk more and more, and I've continued to report on it through multiple angles. And luckily, Pulitzer, when I pitched to them that I think that we can also do a documentary on this topic, where they can be, they can tell their stories themselves, and I'm not the medium anymore. They were on board, and I think and that's how just like one thing led to another, and we were able to start the process.
Right. I wanted to ask about like the choices that you made at the edit desk in terms of the look and tone of the film, because one thing I found interesting, the note on which the film ends, where this is an issue which depends upon a lot of goodwill, from both sides. And unfortunately, given how volatile things are between the two nations, and usually the tendencies are that, how we sort of disengage, like
Mm,
diplomatically, that's always the go-to sort of reaction. But even the activist that you show in this film, he also talks about how there has to be this continued attempt to reach out, no matter what, because it involves lives. And uh, yeah, and interestingly, he talks about the word inadvertently. So it's how both
right.
sides know that whoever is crossing this invisible line is doing it, I mean, not deliberately. So yeah, if you
Hmm.
could talk about how you decided on the tone of the film and, like politically in terms of it would sound like.
So first of all, I want to make this very clear that it's very, I mean, due to the time constraints and the budget constraints, I could
Mhm.
only just show the Indian
Yeah.
side of the issue.
Hmm.
But this issue is pervasive, not just in India, but also in Pakistan. There are
Hmm.
also fishermen from Pakistan that are currently in Indian prisons.
Hmm.
And when our activists speak, they speak for both of them. They don't just say
Hmm.
कि
Hmm. Correct.
हमारे वाले ही छुपाओ and we don't care about yours. No, but there's always the call for the call for release is from both sides. And what Indian activists have been able to achieve is through the work and coordination with their counterparts in Pakistan.
Right.
Without that, the activism itself would not have delivered the results
Hmm.
that it did. Like in 2023, yeah, when I was reporting on this issue, Pakistan had released close to 500 fishermen.
Hmm.
That's like been
Yeah.
the biggest batch that they have ever released. Like when I was researching on the issue, they were close to about 700, 800 fishermen in
Hmm.
Pakistan's custody. But by the time I by the time the year ended, there were 500 people that had been released, and that cannot happen without the concentrated efforts between both the sides.
Right. Right.
So that's one thing. So when I was choosing the tone of the film, I wanted to include as much of an element of this being a both-sided issue than just being India's issue alone.
Hmm.
It's just that the scope for India is much more because our fishermen are more, and the fishing industry in India is far more robust than what it is in Pakistan. So naturally, our fishermen are much, much higher. The number of arrested fishermen are much higher than, Pakistan's fishermen in India. Like, for example, we have I think from the last record that I checked, it was about 200, over 200 in Pakistan from Indian fishermen in Pakistan, but about 80 Pakistani fishermen in India. So when they talk about the release of these fishermen, and when they talk about, these, when the diplomatic talks happen, it's always, even if they wanted to, they cannot have a fair exchange because we
Hmm.
don't have that many fishermen. Like, Pakistan has about 700, for example, and we had
Right.
about probably 100 or something. So
Hmm.
that fair exchange, quid pro quo, is not able to happen. So that's one thing that I came across during my storytelling as well. So keep I try to keep that in mind the whole time, that this is not an exactly quid pro quo situation, and it cannot be 100% reciprocal as much as we'd want it to be. So
Yeah, it
we
was
have to.
also, sorry, it was also a very
Yeah,
learning experience for me as well. Like, because usually this is a common rhetoric everybody falls
mm,
into. And then, especially while reading the piece, I realized that, numbers are also involved here. So you can't have, yeah, but
absolutely.
okay, go on. Yeah.
So yeah, so being this issue cannot be reciprocal
Hmm.
because of the sheer numbers, as you very rightly mentioned. So to remove these complications, one has to keep in mind that these are very poor fishermen.
Right.
They have no vested interest in crossing that line other than doing their job.
Hmm.
And sometimes it happens, and there is also another very complex layer to it, that we have a dispute, which I will not get into the details of it because then it becomes a much lengthier discussion. But there is also a dispute called the Sir Creek dispute,
Hmm.
where this is where the confusion basically originates, because we don't have a very clear demarcation in the Arabian Sea that divides India and Pakistan in the waters. We have 25 nautical miles of no fishing zone.
Hmm.
So if anyone crosses that 25 mile, either of the country can claim it to be theirs, because it's a no
Hmm.
fishing zone. So due to that ambiguity, also sometimes it happens that an Indian fisherman may think that they are still within their waters, but they're probably not, because they are in that no fishing zone. And so
Hmm.
these are just very complex layers to this issue that make this whole arrest even more complicated. And another important factor here is that the release of the fishermen and how they are being treated in
Hmm.
in the Arabian Sea is very much tied to what relations we have diplomatically with each
Right.
other. When the relationships are good, then sometimes they just let go of the fishermen. Sometimes when the relationship is tense, then there are more arrests. It's just, there has been pattern. I mean, it has not been proven per se, but there
Hmm.
has been a pattern that in the arrest of fishermen, in the release of fishermen, depending on how we are dealing with each other diplomatically. So there are so many complex layers to this one issue that the activists have called that, you know what, just remove all of that and just deal with it from a very humanitarian lens, that see, this is what's doing to the families. And this
Mm,
is what I have tried to bring out, that it's not just about those men who are spending years and years in incarceration, but it's also the women who have to now take care of 6 children on their own,
mm. Yeah.
a daughter who has to give up her education because now she's helping the family, like for example in Nidhi's case, she had to give up her education. She's like, I don't have the energy in me to study. I mean, how do I manage the household? How do I manage earning money? How do I manage my study? So I just had to give up my education. So these are some very real life consequences of some some actions that have not come to a resolution yet,
Mm.
which ideally should have by now.
Right, right. And as your first film, this is one question I was very interested in was, did you find any conflict between your journalistic instincts and filmmaking approach, let's say, when you are telling a story? Because, I mean, as journalists, you've always been following stories wherever you've covered, whichever region. But in terms of the medium, does it change anything in you, or did you have to grapple with something, let's say, in this particular medium?
I think that's a very, very interesting question, because this is something I really struggled with while I was studying in MedFilm in Berlin. Because during my assignments, I would always have a very journalistic approach to my
Mm.
storytelling, which was, no, I have to be fair to everybody. I have to be unbiased. I have to be objective. But that kind of takes away,
Mm.
the creativity, and that kind of becomes it's very hard to explain, but it was like something I would often discuss with my tutor as well at school, that I'm always approaching an issue with a with a very, very objective lens. So I'm not able to bring that level of subjectivity to it, like leaving things to imagination, or maybe forcing another person to think by not telling them everything. These were some creative stuff that I was really struggling with while I was studying. So even during filming The Waiting Game, I was literally very much conflicted, because this was, I'm telling a
Mm.
one side of the story, because
Right.
this is also, like I said, also very much
Mm.
prevalent in Pakistan as much as it is in India. But of course, there are some logistical issues that I cannot be in Pakistan, and of course, there is, of course, the financial issue, and a lot of things due
Mm.
to which I had to tell it from a very one single sided lens. And during that, I think that was one thing that I was really conflicted with initially, but then I tried wherever I could in bits and pieces, that that it's an issue that we share, and it's not just with India. Like, that was
Mm.
my little effort in trying to give it a, add a little bit of my journalistic thing in it, even with those texts on screen, that these are the facts. I just couldn't get away with it. Like, I
Right.
had to do it, put the facts in.
Yeah. And now that you've made the film, do you think you would be tempted to make a documentary feature, let's say? I mean, all these stories, whenever I think about it, yeah.
I would love that. I mean, this was, I think, one other challenge that I did not mention about
Mm.
was that when we started filming, at the time the fishing season had stopped, because it's a
Okay.
no fishing season between during the monsoon season.
Mm.
It's no fishing in the sea. So me and my DOP, we were like, because we wanted those sea visuals, we wanted
Mm.
to go in the sea with the fishermen, and I knew that I could have made it happen somehow. So that's like, वो ना भूख रह गई छोटी सी,
Mm.
like it was, I did not achieve it all the way till the end. And I think we were discussing that this could even actually be a much longer film as
Mm.
well. I mean, here we just like basically give you a very quick glance into how things are, but yes,
Mm.
it could be. And maybe I would want to, if I do a feature length, I would love to do it from an environmental
Right.
point of view, and not
Mm.
just I mean, of course, the people who get affected by it, but also the bigger, much bigger, why is it happening? Like, going
Mm.
all the way down to the root cause of it. It's because this rampant pollution of our coastal side, which
Mm.
is pushing our fishermen further and further into the sea, because they are not able to find fish
Right.
along the coast. So they go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and so at some point they end up crossing the border, and that's how the issue basically becomes the issue that it is today.
Mm.
So yes, I do foresee, like, maybe if this
Mm.
film clicks, then I would want to make it into a longer film.
Right. And this again leads me to the next question, naturally, is so you've talked about how, in the film school, you struggled with having like an objective perspective of things as a journalist. But then you were also making a film, so the filmmaker's voice was also something that was important, that it
Mm.
comes up. So when it comes to translating your vision to a visual medium, what did you struggle with most? Because here, like you said, that uh, you did not want to be the medium. So it is for the people to tell their own story, uh, and essentially these are people who are on the other side, who are waiting, and not the people in the eye of the storm, let's say. So, yeah, anything about this that you want to add, that like you had a certain vision and then when you visually try to execute it.
My vision throughout was one that I did not like. I wanted to keep my presence the most minimal. Like I even
Mhm.
wherever even I could remove my voice, I did,
Yeah.
because I wanted it to be their voice through and through.
Mhm.
Other than that, I really initially when I was when this film was going through its phase of editing,
Mhm.
I somewhere inadvertently ended up in introducing a lot of, sorry for the lack of better word, but that imagery that induces
Right.
that trauma porn.
Mhm.
So I think that is also one stylistic choice I made, but thanks to the to the publisher who was very helpful in kind of giving it a much cleaner look. We brainstormed a couple ideas, and I think they made me see that this is like a forced trauma, like don't forced vision of trauma, which I mean, I think it speaks for itself that these women are suffering, but just to show them crying or just to show them that they are really in pain is just probably stylistically not the direction
Mhm.
that you could. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's my choice, but it's also something that you can look into, that whether we can veer away from doing that instead and show more tell,
Yeah.
that's one thing. So I think these are some lessons I learned along the way, that how to show more than tell more, like the actions being speaking more than what is being said outrightly, which is also one thing that journalists do more, that everything has to be said. I want it
Yeah.
like, because for the record, I want everything to be said. I cannot leave anything to assumption. So it is very conflicting with those principles. So I struggled a lot in that process. Like, a lot of the times I had to leave the journalist in me behind, and I had to bring the storyteller in me at the forefront. But most of the times they were conflicting with each other, कि नहीं, उसको बिल्कुल जैसे वो फील कर रही है बिल्कुल वैसे ही बताने दो. But then,
Mhm.
that's when during the editing I realized that नहीं, उसके actions are speaking way more than words. Like she's struggling, you can see that she's in pain, she's crying, or she's cleaning, cooking, handling the children, also, doing so many things. It's people can see a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I think that's something I learned along the way
Right.
also.
Yeah, I mean, just as an observation, only, like even when they're talking about this whole thing, although even if you don't see their tears, it's quite apparent how like how excruciating it must be to just live with this to live with this uncertainty, let's say. I mean, where you don't know how the person is on the other side or when he's going to come back. Especially, I think Nidhi, was that the name of the person? Yeah. Even when
One,
she's cooking, she's trying really hard to not break down, and then just when, maybe she's about to cry, she turns and then resumes her
yeah.
cooking thing. So, yeah, with that show, don't tell. Yeah, this was something that I was constantly thinking about, that maybe as a journalist, it must have been really difficult to restrain yourself in that and
Yeah.
not say
Because here,
everything.
yeah, because as journalists, we just want like, नहीं नहीं उनको बताने दो बिल्कुल
Mm,
word for word. That's how we do it. But then but writing is one thing, showing is another. So it's
another
just,
thing.
it's those, the journalistic principles are very different from
Mm,
storytelling principles. I mean, of course, you need to stay as close to the fact as possible, but at the
mm,
same time, वो इतना hard hitting होने की जरूरत नहीं है. Like it can still be visually like that than, just
right.
speaking about it. So even, I mean, if you must have noticed in the film that they did talk about like no communication with their family
Mm,
members. Like they have zero
mm,
communication after COVID. Like 2021 के बाद कोई बातचीत भी नहीं है आपस में. And तो तुम basically you're just living this entire period of incarceration and anxiety. You don't know the next news that you get
mm,
of your family member. Is it if of their release or of their death or of
mm,
their of their, I don't know, like suffering, God knows. You don't know
Mm,
what you're going to hear. It's probably not going to be good news. So
mm,
these are also some of the things I try to introduce more and more through whatever elements I could find. Ki, matlab, there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of basically staring into the black hole without knowing ki, what's the end
right.
towards to this.
Mm. So, of course, this is a labor of love, but what is one thing about filmmaking you're like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do that, or one process or a part of it that you found very difficult?
Transcribing.
Ah, okay.
Transcribing, I hate that bit. Like, oh my God, it takes up the most of your time, and it's like it's so difficult to do it. I mean, I wish I didn't have to do it, but it's also part of the whole process. So it's just like something while you're transcribing, you also kind of, it's sort of like a
Mm.
revision, but I hate it. It's just, I wish I didn't have
Oh yeah, it's so
to.
time consuming. Like I was working for this media organization, and there was a conference that had happened in Africa, and I was given to transcribe the whole thing. Oh my
Oh
God,
my
it
God.
was just
The most difficult thing, I think, and it's super underrated, like underrated also. Like
sure.
nobody talks
Mm.
about it, but it takes up so much of your time. It takes up so much of your energy. You have to listen to everything like over and over again. And in this case, we had a different language. Even in
Mm.
Gujarati, they had multiple dialects. अब ये भी नहीं है कि गुजराती है तो वो एक ही तरह से
No.
गुजराती बोली जाती. So even at some point, I gave the transcribing work to some translation work to somebody else because obviously I
Mm.
don't speak Gujarati. वो गुजराती थी दोनों मेरी जो
Mm.
फ्रेंड्स हैं दोनों गुजराती होने के बावजूद they were like we are struggling, it's a different dialect, we don't understand half the time, so you have to keep going back and forth. It's a very time
Mm.
consuming job. So I think that was one thing, if I could eliminate from my workflow, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Right. And yeah, and one has to be very careful also, especially for sensitive topics like this. Like one word here and there or a preposition change would change
Could
the
change
entire
the
thing. Yeah, right. Uh,
absolutely.
so any upcoming projects you want to talk about or what's new?
No, this year has all about the waiting game. Like,
Okay.
it started, it's going to be complete 1 year. It's been, I started December
Mm.
last year
Okay.
where with the ideation and everything. और अब ये Jan 9th को release हो रही है. So it's
Okay.
been a complete year. I haven't had the chance to think about anything else because also again, like I said, I'm incredibly slow. My first film, I'm
Mm.
taking extra care about everything here. So not, I mean, of course, I have a dozen project ideas in my head, but I'm just waiting कि ये एक बारी release हो जाए, and then I will dive into some other interesting stories that I have been thinking of.
Sure. We're looking forward to all that. But anything that you would want to add? I mean, I think asked everything that I was planning to ask.
I request
Mm.
people to watch this film and
Yeah.
spread the word. It's not just, I'm not doing like it, other than, of course, shameless self-promotion. It's also a very important topic
Mm.
that a
Sure.
lot of the Indians are still unaware of. It's just surprising that
Mhm.
despite despite this being, prevalent for so many years, there's very little information
Mm.
about it out there, and there's very little being spoken about it also. So please spread the word. Let more and more people see how geopolitics can affect lives on the ground.
Mhm.
So I would absolutely urge, and of course, do share what you think. Do tell me what did the message land? I would love to know how people think about it.
Right. Yeah, for me, I think my biggest takeaway from that was just the amount of just the many layers that this issue has, and it's so many new things that you get to know about. I mean, although yes, when I was reading the article, it's in depth and all of it is in detail, but even the film provides a lot of departure points. So let's say for somebody watching the film, and if one is truly curious, then they can just go and sort of search for these things and do their own kind of research. And I think that's how you have to take all these issues forward, let's say, because I think any kind of boundary dispute like this uh, has its spillover effects. I don't think it's geographically constrained to one aspect. And even uh, although, yes, diplomacy is something that has its own logic, its own ways of, working out. But I think as citizens, it's good to be well informed about things like this because who knows, something is tied up,
Absolutely.
like me here in Bengal, or, it's not as if it's very far removed. because it's happening on the
Absolutely.
other side of the country, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank
And it was such a
thank you
pleasure to
so
talk
much.
about this. Yeah. All the best for your
Likewise.
movie. Yeah. And I would urge everyone to, watch this if you have a chance. And uh, yeah, and if you're interested, go look up her articles on this. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.